We are being recorded, so welcome everyone. Welcome, welcome. My name is Donnie Lowry.
And I'm Kirk Prine.
And we are delighted to welcome all of you today to another Queer Tribe conversation. Now we have a little surprise for you because normally Kirk and I are your hosts. But today we thought we'd interview Kirk because and by the way, he's my husband. So he's very fascinating. So we're going to ask him some questions.
We'll see how fascinating, but yes, good.
Yes. Okay. So let's talk to Kirk, and we're gonna first we have to have his biography. Bio. Yes, we always have little bios, and let's see. We're gonna read a little bio here. So Dr. Kirk Prine believes we are all called to be mystics in the queer tribe. So he's going to share his personal journey as well as stories of queer mystics throughout history. Kirk brings unique gifts, skills, and experience to being a body, story, life coach, healer, and queer activist. Rich in awakenings, Kirk's own story as a sexual abuse survivor and thriver allowed him to develop extraordinary gifts of listening and seeing beyond what is apparent. Mystical experiences and learning in the behavioral sciences have grounded Kirk as a healer in flesh and spirit community. And the Missing Thread Mystery School, which teaches the wisdom to set you free, resides in the body. Kirk's 5 years in seminary Bible college training and 7 years in graduate studies taught him to ask questions about holistic healing that few people were willing to ask. Exploring across spiritual traditions and gathering the best scientific understandings of how healing takes place has been Kirk's purpose and passion. This is demonstrated significantly during Kirk's 17-year practice as a psychotherapist, where he constantly faced hundreds of clients and friends with AIDS. By exploring the question of why 3 to 10% of people never die from a life-threatening disease, enabled Kirk to weave together a methodology of healing and success that applies to anyone who is challenged in their expression of health, wealth, relationships, and/or purpose. By listening to the body, Kirk healed himself of the stories that held him back. In addition, his training as a certified massage therapist, traditional Reiki master, and ritualist has added to the skill set he blends with Donnie to bring liberation to his clients. Bunny, I never realized you could do all that. How about that?
Yeah. Amazing to know what you can do, right?
Yes, when you list it all. Anyway, welcome.
Yeah, thank you.
So where should we begin? Maybe you can tell people about your spiritual path.
Okay, all right. So yeah, we've got years, right? Some highlights. So, this call we wanted, we're going to do an ecstatic massage here in a couple of weeks. And the focus or the theme of that experience of getting kind of into an altered space is to have an internal journey with ourselves, with spirit, with that connection to all that is. So that's kind of why I wanted to do this call about mysticism and my own kind of viewpoint, and know that you don't have to believe anything that I believe. But if I invite you into more questions on your spiritual journey, I will feel accomplished from this call. So, my story starts with actually, I grew up in a mildly dysfunctional family, like many of us, and in the Midwest. And in my family, though, my parents were both, they grew up as farmers and moved to the city of Cincinnati, which was a big deal for them. And but their spirituality was not embedded in any tradition, even though they would probably call themselves Christians at the time. But they had kind of an Appalachian folklore kind of spirituality. So examples would be My mother, like when my grandmother died, my mother heard someone knocking at the window, and she just said, "Oh, grandma just died." Um, or my uncle, who was, worked with the military, and consulted with them in NASA, and so he was a big scientist. But he came to visit us one time in our home, and he didn't believe in a whole lot of things other than good empirical science. And while he was there, an apparition of a person, a being, uh, showed up, walking through the door into the bedroom where he was sleeping. So needless to say, I grew up with the possibilities of the beyond the veil, of our ancestors, of guidance, of wisdom, of information, of experiences that were more than just empirically based. So that was actually a gift to me. The other odd gift that I put in there is actually my woundedness. So as a boy, around 6 years old, my father actually sexually abused me. So, painful time. And of course, I did all kinds of work that I've healed from. And in fact, my father at this point he's long gone. Has often been a guide. In fact, we found our home kind of with the assistance of the ancestor of my father, but after much healing work. And one of the things that happened for me during my abuse experience was I ended up kind of having, not kind of, I had a story in my body that I could only have pleasure with pain. So I had to have pain to have pleasure, because after the abuse, my father would actually hold me, which was what I was longing for as a little boy. But of course, the abuse was not what I was longing for. And having done all of that work around letting that go and freeing myself through lots of somatic work and inner work, what I learned was, one, that when I was that boy being abused, I learned how to leave my body. So I literally, it's called disassociation in psychological terms, but I would leave my body and I would actually kind of wander around the basement of our home, and so I could see different things that were going on. So leaving my body is something that I learned how to do very early on. And, all of shamanism and mysticism, they all have an aspect of knowing that we are in our bodies, but we also that we are not our bodies, and that we can visit other realms, other beyond the veil. So the gift of that was I learned how to listen deeply, and I learned that I could leave my body and journey outward and bring back information. So that was one of the gifts of that experience, that troubling experience that I delight in now, because it's helped to make me more the healer and the listener and the empath that I am to the people that I work with. So fast forwarding, the AIDS epidemic came along, and during that period of time, I started having numerous mystical experiences. So from, well, I'll back up. So back up. Went from the abuse experience to actually the most important thing was I had an experience within the realm of Christianity and in the ritual of in some Christian rituals, that just totally washed over me, through me. I call it my whoosh moments, where my acceptance of the Christ at that time, I just felt this whoosh go through me, and the byproduct of that, though, was all the people around me were like really happy that I had accepted Jesus as Lord, and kind of the dogma stuff. But for me, what happened was I felt this sparkle happen around everything, and I went out for a walk, and I literally felt the trees talking to me. And trees had always been kind of my shelter from my abuse time. So here I was having kind of this experience of awakening that came through, the Christian venue. But I felt like the trees were telling me, all will be well. And so that is just embodied in me. And so I literally, John, when you talk about, hugging, but hugging trees, I hug trees a lot, but I see them as sentient beings. I feel them as sentient beings. And their wisdom has often sustained me or grounded me or supported me, if nothing else, my imagination, but I feel like much more energetically than that. So there was that experience of a kind of a conversion experience within the realms of Christianity. And then soon after that, I started coming out as a boy, and I had met some seminarian who then taught me about water baptism, and so another Christian ritual. And so I went to his church and got baptized in water, and again I had this whoosh feeling happen through me, and then soon after that I went to go swimming on a summer day, and I was attracted to men, but I had never had a sexual experience, and a man picked me up. He saw my curiosity, and he invited me over, and I didn't know what I was in for. I just knew I really wanted it. I knew it was something that my heart was saying yes to. And so while I'm making love or having sex, one of my early sex experiences with this man, all of a sudden we're in the throes of just amazing pleasure. And so it's deep, even as I tell you the story, I remember all of what this man felt like and smelled like, and those things that kind of get encoded in you. And in the experience, he stopped me at some point and he said, "Kirk, what did you just do to me?" And I went, "Oh, because I was just having a great time. I don't know." But I felt that whoosh go through me, just like I had in my spiritual kind of awakening moment. And he said to me, "I've had tendonitis for years and have had great pain, and it's all gone. I don't have any pain." So it was kind of like, wow, the same whoosh of spirit that kind of awakened me, that whoosh happened again while I'm having an early sexual experience, and a man physiologically was healed from that experience. So I knew deeply embedded in my body, in my queer body, that sex and spirit and the energy of sex and spirit are not separate. They are one in the same. And anything that is not one in the same is really about something other than the intention of sharing heart to heart, body to body, love to love. So that experience kind of informed my life a lot, and took me into knowing that as I went into seminary and I started learning that, oh, I'm an abomination of God. Oh, I'm, all of the things that fundamentalist Christianity started layering on me. Those were not my experiences. But because they were coming from my teachers, I believed them. So I believe the lies that most of us have had embedded in our bodies, in our lives, at some time or another, just from the culture, no matter whether you've been a part of any kind of spiritual tradition or not. Fast forward then to the AIDS years, and I'd had all these mystical experiences, and people were dying, and so sitting with people while they were dying became a regular routine. So I knew at the time of the AIDS epidemic, 300 people who died. And so sitting with, or I felt like I became a midwife to the dying. And one of our brothers that John knows, Matthew Simmons, used to do work called midwiving the dying, where he simply would be with gay queer brothers and hold them, or bring some erotic energy to them while they were in the throes of passing away. And so to me, I started getting it, oh my gosh, my commitment to ministry and to the divine is being expressed through my queer body as a healer. And I started the Healing Circle of Cincinnati, and got deeply involved in helping people live longer and better. And in fact, many of the people that we worked with in the Healing Circle are continuing to be alive and well and thriving today. So the beauty of that story is knowing, yeah, the healing can happen, does happen, and will continue to happen if we are open to those possibilities, and learning about what is it that allows someone to live longer and better, and what is it that actually allows someone to heal into death peacefully, were kind of the trajectories that I was on for a while. So let me fast forward to talk about the topic of mysticism. It's if you are on my Facebook page, I put up a video of a dear brother named Michael Kelly, and Michael was a Catholic priest, and in Melbourne, Australia. And Donnie and I met him when we went out to form our Flesh and Spirit community, and just adored him. And he at the time was a member of what was called the Rainbow Sash. And Michael took queer people and queer allies into Catholic churches, and they all would wear sashes, and they would inform the churches before they came that they were coming, so that there was no surprise there, but to challenge the church to look at its own doctrines and dogmas around communion and welcoming gay and lesbian and bisexual and transgender people. So of course they were rejected. But they had a long history of confronting the church and bringing through that some strong awareness how queer people can be on any religious path, and of course his path was a Christian path within Catholicism. And so he wrote then a book called A Christian Mysticism and the Queer Flame, if you want a kind of a background thing. And I put up a video of him on my Facebook page if you kind of want to learn a little bit about Michael Kelly. So he was, in my mind, a contemporary mystic, along with the other person that I'm referencing for today is, of course, Andrew Harvey's book. And I met Andrew Harvey a number of years ago, and which he talked about queer mystics, and he opened his conversation talking about how mysticism is this union of us with the divine, and that nothing could separate us from the love of God. And so as he's talking, he talked about meeting a Jewish mystic who, when he met him, he noticed that on his arm were the tattoos of being in the concentration camp. And so he asked the brother about his experience, and this queer mystic, or this Jewish mystic, shared his story, and it touched me so much. I felt like it was relevant to our work today as we kind of play with queer mysticism and how we as lovers bring queer mysticism to the world. But he talked about how in the concentration camp, of course, he saw horrible things. And one of the guards who was assigned to the section in which he inhabited had beaten him oftentimes, and on that particular day had even raped him. And so, this horrible experience that this Jewish mystic is sharing with Andrew Harvey. And he said what he did was he went out into the courtyard after he had been abused, and he just opened up his hands to the divine. And he knew he had a choice. In fact, he heard a voice say to him, "What do you choose?" And he said, "I choose love." And he just kept saying, "I choose love. I choose love. I choose love. I choose love. I choose love." And he too just felt that whoosh of the divine holding him, embracing him. And the Jewish mystic went back into, and of course, the first person that he saw was the guard who had abused him. And instead of feeling the rage and the pain that he had felt when he went into the courtyard, this Jewish mystic talked about how what he felt now was pity. So he had shifted from that rage to actually having compassion on this man who was his abuser. True mystical experience that he had of transforming him so that he could stay present in the world until he finally was able to be released. So queer mystics, I think we can't talk about ourselves separate from some of the baggage and the pain that we may have experienced from religion and religious institutions and people who have bought into the lies who they think we are because of religion. So whether we start with, Sappho, reminding us that women's bodies and all bodies in intimacy are a part of the divine in her poetry speaking to us, or whether it's Audre Lorde speaking to us about how our erotic energy that we have is actually the energy of our passion And that energy of our passion is what's needed to change the world. So Audre Lorde was all the time talking about the power of our passion, our erotic passion in activism. So to not think about, oh, we're having just pleasure for pleasure's sake, which is good in and of itself because it brings wholeness, but pleasure that ignites us to be of greater service through our bodies, for ourselves and for others. So I'm going to keep rattling off stories, just kind of germinate all these images for you. In my own personal story, as I kept journeying along, at one point realizing that I was not going to become a priest, but had dabbled in the Franciscan community. In fact, I was part of Richard Rohr's community called New Jerusalem in Cincinnati, Ohio, when he started that Franciscan community there. And St. Francis just has always spoken to my heart. And whether we think of him as orientationally queer or not, every mystic in my mind is queer because they're outside the boxes. They don't have a rigidity around their religion. They have a heartfelt love of the divine that expands them and is inclusive beyond their own religious knowings and beliefs. And St. Francis always touched me because his story felt so much like my story in many respects, where St. Francis from a wealthy family, cloth makers, and that he felt the call of the divine. One time, of course, the famous time we all know of is that he saw the image of while he was actually probably in delirium from being sick, but he saw an image of the Christ come off of the cross and come down to him and speak to him about, Francis, go rebuild my church. And he thought that was a literal experience to be had. And he started building the church. And of course, we all know what that became, a place for the poor and the disenfranchised and the animals and all beings to be celebrated in this poverty of spirit that loved God and the Creator. But Francis was also afraid of the lepers. And so it was noted that one of his greatest fears was to go serve the lepers, and yet he felt called to do that. So he stepped beyond his fear. I call him being a peaceful warrior at that point. He stepped beyond his fears to go to the lepers, to touch them, to bathe them, to heal them. And of course, in the process of him bringing healing to these disenfranchised untouchables, he also healed himself of his own fears. So mystics for me are those who tap into the divine across all traditions. Hildegard of Bingen, another one, she often kind of feminized the divine for us. But Hildegard, and Donnie and I got to go to, there's a museum in Germany where much of her paintings and writings and images are stored, and we got to see some of the artistry and that she had. But her whole work as a healer and a devotee to the divine was she used crystals, she used herbs, she called upon the many names of the divine, and she also called upon the saints to help infuse the work. That was her path of helping to expand and create change. Rumi. Rumi for me is kind of my hardcore who lives in me. And Rumi, I think of as in love with Shams. And again, whether their love was ever physically demonstrated sexually or not, the love of Shams from Rumi was, Rumi saw Shams clearly as the beloved. Shams was his teacher, but even more, he was a representation of the beloved to him. And I know when Shams died or was killed, Rumi then grabbed hold of a pole and started twirling around the pole. And as he swirled, which then became kind of the whirling dervish thing that we all know from Sufi dancing, he began to utter out the poetry that was being channeled through him. So the mysteries of the divine, to me, are embedded and speak radically through Rumi to me. You all probably have your own mystics that are both queer or queer just because they were mystics, that are people that you call upon or you reverence, or whose writings or poetry or art or healing stories have inspired your life. So I'll keep going. As I went on my journey and fell in love with Rumi, I came to the Bay Area and started doing the work of flesh and spirit here. And even the work of flesh and spirit was kind of mystically empowered, because it was during a time when a brother had died of AIDS. His name was Ted, and Ted came to me as I'm driving, of all things, to a bathhouse. So I was driving, because I was a psychotherapist at the time. I was driving from Cincinnati to Indianapolis to go to a bathhouse, and I'm chanting Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, and I felt this whoosh come, like there was a presence of somebody, and I felt like, oh, that presence wanted to help me with the work that I was creating called Flesh and Spirit. And indeed, when I got home from having a luscious time at the bathhouse and having this revelation of feeling the support of someone who I knew was someone familiar to me, I thought it might be this man, Ted, who had just died. I went to see one of my friends, Victor Peruta, and he is a trans channel person. And when I saw Victor, he did it. He started to do a tarot reading, and before even, he turned over one card, which is called the Great Work, and he said to me, Kirk, there's somebody, Theodore, Ted, somebody who wants to help you with this new work that you're creating. And again, my friend didn't know the new work that I was creating was going to be Flesh and Spirit Community. But indeed, Ted was my helper. So even the inception of Flesh and Spirit came from actually a mystical experience of having a brother, an ancestor, visit me and feel his support in creating Flesh and Spirit Community. Now I'm fast forwarding back to the Bay Area, where I met Melodoma Somé. And Melodoma Somé is the African Dagara shaman. And Melodoma Some's actual name actually means bridge to the white people. So he knew from his ancestors who were called gatekeepers. So the queer people in the tribe, his tribe, are gatekeepers. And the queer people would go into their caves to get into ecstatic spaces like we will do in our ecstatic massage, to get into ecstatic spaces to welcome the wisdom of the earth and the ancestors and the elements and the guides that are there for them to speak at any given time. So Melodoma Some's name came from the gatekeepers. And then Melodoma Some brought the wisdom of the dagger of people to say there's a whole group of people honored in my tribe who are men who love men. And when they go into the caves, I'm going to touch my beloved, but they will actually make love to each other as part of the ritual, or touch each other to get each other awakened, to have that kind of download of information and connecting to spirit and the ancestors. So I'm giving you a few names and images and people that have influenced my life, and there are about 100 others. And if you, of course, if you read Andrew Harvey's book,
sure.
there are a zillion folks who are artists and poets and writers and scholars and healers throughout the ages, both contemporary and past, that we can call our queer ancestors as queer mystics, who really had a way of tapping into the divine source, and that expression of the divine source through their bodies. So kind of giving you fuel, and we're almost even out of time just because I've spent so much time telling all those stories, but I wanted to open it up if anybody had any remarks or questions, or especially, who are the mystics, the queer mystics that have inspired your life from any tradition, knowing that tradition may be earth-based, it may be sky-based, it may be in a religion, or it may be someone like James Broughton, who was clearly a mystic in my mind, but pretty much renounced most of religion, but was totally tapped in, and of course brought to us things like Short Mountain Sanctuary, the Radical Fairies, and his cohort, Harry Hay. Those people were all deeply entrenched in their connection to the divine through our sacred bodies, and loving and caring and even sexually transmitting our heart with each other through our bodies. So enough of my words. Anybody comments, thoughts, mystics that you want to name that have been influential in your own life? Or do you see yourself as a mystic? Because that's the last thing is, I believe it's kind of like John Ballou said, being queer, all of us we may be born into these bodies, into these queer bodies, but it doesn't necessarily mean we understand the mission of that. So we may not understand the calling of being queer. So a lot of us are out there kind of figuring it all out, but there really, in my mind, there's a calling. I came here on purpose in this queer body, in this time, to do the work and service, is my belief. But I'll open it up to you. Any questions, thoughts, remarks?
Yeah, well, I guess Francis has always been my hero, but do you want me to just focus on that? Because there was some other thoughts I had, but I don't want to.
Yeah, no, you can share whatever.
Oh, well, I'm a psychotherapist.
Oh, good.
And I do EMDR, helping people heal traumatic childhood memories, and
great.
And in my own, of course. but I grew up in a hyper masculine household.
Yes.
And I always felt like I didn't belong because when we would have every Sunday, we'd go to my father's sister's house and they were Italian. We'd have a big Italian dinner, the polenta, the sausage, the raviolis, homemade, all that stuff. But then after the dinner was over, the men would sit in the living room and watch the football game and yell at the TV set. And the women would be in the kitchen connecting. And I would go, well, I want to be in there with them,
Yeah.
but I'm a guy, a man, so I shouldn't be there. But I don't feel I belong here either.
Right.
So I felt like I'm watching all this and going, I don't fit in anywhere.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it didn't fit in with my family either. From very beginning, I didn't. So
Yeah.
I was thinking about what you said, and I've never had any of these mystical experiences. But when you talk about sex, it's like presently, I mean, I've had sexual encounters, but they always leave me because it's like, it's just about sex.
Mm, mm.
I want connection. I want the emotional, actually the emotional connection is more important to me than the sex.
Yes.
So I haven't had that experience of being with someone where you have that both.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
I'm seeing a therapist. He's a gay therapist. I've seen him for
Great.
5 years, and he's somatic. So he holds me, and I'm feeling that love and feeling myself up. And I don't even really care if we're not sexual,
Yes.
but that feeds me as much, if not more. But I've had difficulty finding relationships with that combination. It's either usually just sex, and
Yeah.
it leaves me feeling. So when you talked about connecting the two
Yes.
and how you felt that,
Yes.
well, I've never had that experience.
Yes. Yes.
So
Yeah. Well, my response is, one, your experience is going to be yours and not mine. So you don't have to mimic or duplicate what I've experienced. And at the same time, what you can hear from my story is the possibility of feeling that love and that connection and the sensuality and sexuality all in one. So yeah, thank you for sharing that.
Does anyone else have a comment? Because we're already at time, unfortunately. Well, Bunny, do you want to?
I do want to close with.
Well, I just have a quick question. If I
Yes.
join,
Yes.
years ago, I came to one of your gatherings, and I was in a different place, but
Yeah.
and I'm right now, because of the virus, you're not having in-person gatherings, correct?
No, actually, we are.
Oh, you are.
We are. Yes. Yes.
How can I'd like to come to the next one.
Yeah.
Because
So if you go to fleshandspirit.org.
I just put it in the
great.
chat.
You can see all the events, and there are 4 fully vaccinated things, and of course we're all paying attention to how things are progressing and so forth. But yeah, we are doing touch experiences again.
Because I'm fully vaxxed, so okay.
Yeah, great. Well, we would love to see you at any of our events.
Yes.
Yeah. My closing is, it's kind of that in these times where so many lies, I think, are coming to the surface to be reformed, broken up, cleared out. And so the gay lie, I think, is just one of a zillion lies. And as we clear those, and as I believe we tap into the mysticism of who we are and celebrate our whole erotic bodies, that we have much to offer other communities and bringing support, because erasing histories is what the oppressors always do. And I know as queer mystics, what we do, in fact, I think it was Andrew Harvey talked about, as a queer mystic, we are actually being spiritually subversive. So we are challenging the norms and standards and rules and regulations and laws that do not lead to freedom, wholeness, healing, and well-being. And so that's what I see as we wake up more as queer mystics, embodied, sharing flesh with flesh, however we do that in our hearts, our imaginations, or with our bodies, that we are going to change the world. So those are kind of my closing thoughts. Beloveds, thank you so much for being on this call. And we have another delicious brother coming up soon, Nick. We haven't put a date on it, but he also
Nick,
is,
yes.
is a sacred intimate former priest, and we'll be talking a lot more about kind of our sacred bodies and his journey, which will be quite juicy. So you won't want to miss that.
Yes.
Call as
Is
well.
that Nick Ravellis?
Yes.
It is.
I know him.
Good, good. We
Oh
love
my,
him.
what a small world.
It is a small
Yeah.
world. You know, we love that.
Can I ask
Small
one
world famous.
question? Oh, can I
Sure.
ask one quick question? One thing that bothers me of how much I'm affected by the visual.
Uh-huh.
When I see a gay man, the first thing I notice is visual. And I don't like that because then I'm seeing, I don't know, imperfections,
Sure.
my own imperfections, and
Sure.
it blocks, and I don't
Sure.
know how to unblock it.
Sure, sure. Close your eyes. Close your eyes and drop into your heart. And yeah, I mean, one of our dearest little friends, a deeply autistic brother, but he read energy a lot, and he would always stop us when we were in the midst of conversation that was not coming from the heart. So close your eyes, drop into your heart, and connect, and then come back. Oh, the beauty of this person. Ah, he is wondrously made. I am wondrously made. There we go.
Well, I hope by coming into your community, I can start developing that.
We would love for that to happen.
Yeah.
Okay, we need to go, but thank you all so much for being here.
Thank you.
Love you all.
Bye-bye.
Bye.